Monarchy is not a system of governance that can be argued for through modern-day philosophical foundations within current society. To the contrary, one must first undo all post-Enlightenment philosophies that undermine its faith and virtue, and submit to the reality that it is the natural rule of law that best reflects human nature. Monarchy is thus not a system of governance that is planned out by the human mind, nor is it made manifest in material values such as written constitutions. It cannot be measured or reasoned, nor counted into existence, and it most certainly cannot fit with a cold and scientific worldview. But it is rather to the uttermost contrary, a reflection of the cosmic and immaterial reality in which entire collectives of people put their faith into, an anchor to God himself and a mirror that reflects the rule of heaven here on earth. Aristotle described monarchy as, quote, the one system of government where power is exercised for the good of all. Similarly, Ezra Stiles argued that, quote, a monarchy conducted with infinite wisdom and infinite benevolence is the most perfect of all possible governments. Monarchy is not an artificial system of governance, but to the contrary, it is the one system of governance that is most reflective of human nature. This means that the expectations that are placed on the ruler are the very same expectations we should all have of ourselves. Two philosophers that demonstrated this well were Aristotle and Confucius. For them, the relationship between the individuals, their family, their community, and nation were all one and the same. Confucius points this out with his 5 relationships: the relationship between parent and child, husband and wife, elder and younger sibling, elder and younger friend, and finally ruler and subject were fundamentally the same and operated on the same cosmic principles of virtue and standards of relationship. And it is because of this that the way a king ought to rule is not an abstract concept which is beyond human understanding, but it is rather this fundamental reality that is lived out by everyone in their day-to-day life. Understanding this allows ultimately for a more humane government. That you should treat the members of your nation as if they were members of your own family instead of a resource to exploit for your own selfish interests. Thus, monarchy, as the ancients understood it, was not inherently antisocial. It operated in a sense that people understood it as it operated within the family dynamics of their own lives. Another aspect of monarchy that is reflective of human nature is the manner in which it is passed down. One of the greatest criticisms of monarchy through post-Enlightenment philosophy is the argument that handing power down from generation to generation is unjust and immoral. This notion, however, is based on a complete rejection of natural morality, for this is in fact the most moral way to transfer power, in the same way that any family would seek to pass down their own values, customs, traditions, religion, wealth, and identity to their own children and future generations. In a wider societal sense, the same is done in that each generation of a nation seeks to pass down its values, wealth, and blessings to the next. This natural principle is no different between a king and his potential heirs. Why should this be any different with the government? An interesting point to note is that by Aristotle's definitions, a monarchy can never be a tyranny, nor can a tyranny ever be a monarchy. A monarchy is the rule of one for the common good of all, while a tyranny is the rule of one for the vanity of the self. Regarding the obvious criticism of how monarchy is supposed to be prevented from being a tyranny is a cultural and moral question that pertains to virtue and faith rather than system of governance. Regardless of government system, all corruption and exploitation can best be prevented through a common understanding and practice of spirituality, faith, objective morality, culture, and virtue. This relationship between ruler and subject is once again best reflected within the family experience within every person's own life. For any of this to work, it is vital that every relationship be subject to a moral framework that spiritually yokes individuals within a collective of a nation together, both in will and in spirit. It is for this reason that passing power within the family is the best way, because it ensures that these morals can be taught from birth to all future rulers in the same way that any good parents would want to do with their own children. This is also how accountability is ensured for all leaders. There is no temporary office nor mass bureaucracy to escape responsibility. Philosophically, monarchy is the most natural form of rule. To anyone with a good family who lived before the French Revolution, this would have seemed perfectly obvious. The burden of proof ultimately does not lie with the monarchists, for it is the form of rule that mankind is most comfortable, and by virtue of its sheer age, it obviously worked in the same way that a healthy traditional family structure has always worked and still works even to this day. And of course, it is not only a reflection of human nature, but also of divine purpose, for what is God but both a king and a father? As it states in Exodus chapter 20 verse 12, quote, "Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee." This principle of submission and honor is expounded in 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 17, where it is stated, quote, "Honor all men, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king." Jesus Christ, whom many recognize to hold the title of King of Kings, himself stated in Matthew chapter 22 verse 21, quote, "Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's." Even the prayer that Jesus Christ taught to his disciples asks for the divine order of heaven to be made manifest on the earth. Christ states in Matthew chapter 6 verse 10, quote, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven." Monarchy is stated to be ordained by God in Romans chapter 13 verses 1 to 2, where it is stated, quote, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation." Is it thus any surprise to a historically educated Christian that every post-Enlightenment movement that sought to overthrow monarchical rule has been led by anti-Christian deists who not only reject kings, but God himself? Every revolution since the French Revolution has indeed been a bloodbath of rebellion against the ordinances of God. Theologically speaking, to oppose monarchy as a system on earth is equivalent to rejecting God's sovereignty and rule in heaven. Thus, the real burden of proof is not on the monarchist, but rather on the proponents of liberal democracy and constitutional republics. Just as the atheist has the burden of proof to convince believers to abandon notions of God, so too do Democrats and Republicans bear the burden of proof to convince monarchists and fascists to abandon notions of absolute national sovereignty and autocracy. If the idea of democracy and republicanism is so inherent to mankind, why is it that they had to be discovered in specific parts of Europe during specific periods of history by specific rootless internationalist groups who were members of a specific secret society? Why further was it that monarchy was practiced by almost the entirety of humanity throughout almost the entirety of human history? What does it say about a democracy or a republic when it seems that it can only take root once accompanied by violence and war? Clemens von Metternich famously stated, quote, "Whenever I hear the word democracy, I know a bloodbath is coming." How many nations have peacefully transitioned from a monarchy to a republic, relative to the ones which underwent a violent revolution or had it imposed on them through invasions by peace-loving democracies? What is the overall point of imposing a republic on society? What gain does it actually bring people? Liberty? What exactly is liberty worth when it can only be bought on mountains of corpses? If democracy is supposed to make men free, then why is it that the most totalitarian governments in modern history have only taken power in the absence of a ruling monarch? Why is it that the worst abuses of power that were claimed wouldn't happen if monarchical rule were to be eliminated, abuses such as nepotism, corruption, and disregard for rights and traditions, been multiplied in democratic republics instead of subtracted? Why is it that in the Middle East there wasn't a single violent revolution in any of the monarchies, but only in the republics? The weight of history, common sense, natural law, and divine purpose all agree that democracies and republics are bad ideas. It is almost impossible to find republics outside perhaps the merchant republics like Venice or Novgorod that didn't fail miserably, while monarchies have shown that they can last ad infinitum. The tree of liberty may indeed need to be watered by the blood of tyrants and patriots, but no one seems to speak of the countless innocents it also seems to need for sustenance, or that the fruit that it produces has become unbearably bitter from all that blood. The reason it is difficult to argue for monarchy these days is not that the tree of monarchy cannot grow, but rather because the Republicans have poisoned the soil. It would seem that the Republicans want to do to the nation that which taking away a father from a family does to the children. This is not to say that a republic cannot function. However, if the society within a republic were to operate by traditional understandings, where the family, community, and the nation are all one and the same, it would look a lot more like a monarchy. These neo-monarchist republics are best exemplified through the fascist and National Socialist movements of the 20th century.